everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics, Big Baby and STARCRASHER at KINGCOMICS.CA. So join me today, guys, for episode 521 of BBR. We're taking a look at some early 90s Liam Sharp artwork on Death's Head 2. This is the regular series, issue number 4, cover dated March 1993. And really, you know, I didn't experience Death's Head back in the day originally when it came out. I would see the ads and stuff, but I never really followed it. And it's been real fun looking at these first 4 issues. Unfortunately, Liam Sharp doesn't draw the next issue, so we'll be moving on to something different, featuring Liam Sharp artwork next Liam Sharp review. But it's been really fun because it's kind of like a step back in time to everything that we enjoyed about 90s comics, right? First of all, the whole series has gatefold covers. I don't know if I featured them in past reviews, but I will feature this one because I think it's a pretty cool looking cover. You've got the extreme 90s hatching all over the place, the inking style that was in vogue back then, right? Kind of Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld inspired. You've got the crazy character designs, very extreme, asymmetrical designs, lots of cybernetics, lots of skulls, right? You've got the villain of the piece, Wrathchild, you know, huge cape, shoulder pads, etc. The typical 90s kind of image look. So really what you have with Death's Head, I find, is kind of a mix of all the stuff we loved about Marvel and Image comics all kind of wrapped into one package. You've got the Image aesthetic, but you've got the Marvel characters, right? X-Men's been guest starring, in the series since issue number 1. So this whole first 4-part storyline, basically guest starring the X-Men all the way through, really helps with sales, helps feature obviously characters that we're familiar with, and I think Liam Sharp does a great job in interpreting them. There's some weirdness here and there occasionally with the way he draws the X-Men. Cyclops all of a sudden here is missing a lot of the accoutrements and pouches and belts and stuff that he usually has with his Jim Lee 90s design. But you know, other than that, the art is stellar. Not a lot of complaints on that side, and it does definitely ring true with what was the aesthetic in the early 90s that we were all into. And one of the better examples of it, I think, other than the Image founding fathers themselves, right? So everyone was following what was popular back then. So everyone was trying to do that, you know, Image aesthetic. I think Liam Sharp pulls it off pretty well, as you can see on the cover here. So without further ado, great looking double gatefold cover, or wraparound cover rather. And we'll have a look inside at what Liam Sharp's doing there. So starting off with, you know, last issue, the X-Men having been saved basically by this character here. Her name is Phaedra. I like the 90s design. There's a bit of a Medusa influence, I think, with these kind of tentacles coming out of her head, but the costume design is very minimalist. For the female form, as we know, the 90s girls and lady characters in the comics, Psylocke is a good example back here, we're just basically wearing less and less. This just feels like this is the least amount they could be doing to cover up their nipples and their genitalia here. But she's some sort of, you know, otherworldly alien kind of mystical being, so I guess it makes sense within the context of the story. And again, just look at all that glorious 90s hatching down here on these guys' muscles. And we're going to be getting a lot of that throughout this issue. The vertical panels, which are a 90s kind of trope that a lot of artists use. Going to see that all throughout this issue. We got some more here, right? Very, very popular kind of layout strategy in the 90s. So finally, now moving back, she's been protecting the X-Men and Death's Head within the sphere of nothingness, I guess, but then all of a sudden it, you know, gets broken through and we get our characters from last issue, the cyber orcs that I like to call them, that were attacking Death's Head and the X-Men last issue. Vertical panels here used pretty much throughout the whole issue, so there's kind of an establishment of a certain rhythm and a certain compositional logic, I guess, throughout the book. Also, I think when you do the vertical panels, you know, you can focus on what's important and crop out a lot of stuff that you don't want to draw that might take more time to draw. This panel, for example, just does away with detail, you know, at the top and at the bottom, just lots of negative space. Probably a time-saving device, but also helps to focus on what's actually going on in that panel. Jubilee tending to Tuck, who's been injured, and also kind of separates that panel out from the rest of the visual stuff that's pretty heavy and loaded with details, so it makes it stand out as well. But definitely a time-saving device as well for hitting those deadlines. Just some beautiful chaos in a lot of the panels in this issue. Here's a good example of the action going on. Lots of stuff, you know, jammed into one panel here. Death's Head fighting off 2 orcs. Cyclops, you know, shooting his eye rays or eye blasts, whatever you want to call those, Rogue, you know, flying around Psylocke. There's just a lot going down in one single panel. And it's well laid out and easy to understand, easy to read visually. So kudos to Liam Sharp on that. One thing I talked about, the inconsistency of Cyclops' costume on the cover. We're back to kind of his typical look with the straps and the pouches and stuff. And then boom, all of a sudden on this page, those disappear again. So maybe it's a deadline thing. Maybe he's working really fast, you know. Not going to fault him for it because the Cyclops still looks pretty cool overall. And, you know, other artists have been known to do that from time to time. Guys like Rob Liefeld, even Jack Kirby, right? So not the end of the world. Kind of an interesting continuous sequence here where, you know, Cyclops through these vertical panels is fighting off this orc using more hand-to-hand stuff, which is kind of unusual for Cyclops, I think, other than using his eye blast. Interesting to see, though. And then there's kind of a bit of a follow-through here in this panel, almost like these two panels, or actually these three panels are kind of almost the same panel, and the orc is falling through all three of the panels here. Not quite, you know, the splash page that you split into three panels just to slow down the action a bit, but there's kind of a rhythm and a sequence here that I really like. It almost feels like that. Very interesting. You know, he does do it here with Gambit, so it's kind of a interesting storytelling, I would say, overall, where some things are kind of translated literally from panel to panel and others, you know, actually changes. It's not like we're getting the rest of this guy's arm in this panel here. We're actually getting him falling through all three panels. So kind of a mix of techniques in the storytelling here that's very interesting to me, and not something I've seen a lot of. So it's a mix of both, right? Interesting. Here's another kind of, you know, vertical panel sequence with this orc just kind of jumping towards us, moving towards the foreground, which is kind of interesting as well. And just a lot of cool visuals in this issue. It's kind of the culmination of the whole kind of storyline that we saw from issue 1 to now. And Liam Sharp, maybe because he knows this is his last issue here, really pouring it on. This shot of Death's Head here, blasting his cyber gun, is pretty darn cool, I think. And he's definitely not skimping out on the backgrounds like a lot of 90s artists would do. You know, when you get an establishing shot like this, they're just in some weird, you know, dimension with these floating islands and stuff. But the amount of detail that you see here, again, maybe a little bit more when it comes to the backgrounds, naturalistically, stylistically looking like Liam Sharp's more natural style rather than his kind of Jim Lee impersonation or you know, West Coast inking kind of look. Just love all this stuff here. They almost look like floating teeth. I don't know if that's the inspiration, you know, behind the design, but it looks pretty cool. Lots of smoke and fuming stuff going all around. Lots of layering in that image. Just this must have taken quite a bit of time to draw, and it looks great. The colors, again, are kind of garish. I've talked about this before, but somehow I feel like they still kind of work with the vibe of Death's Head and that early 90s kind of over-the-top feeling. We get kind of just a descriptive page, right? Describing, you know, all the Marvel UK, or some of the Marvel UK characters here. Just kind of giving you a little bit of backstory on Phaedra and the whole conflict in one kind of more design page, I guess. Exposition page is how I describe it, right? More of a pinup than anything else. And again, he's just using the vertical panels all throughout this comic. I'd be curious to know if that was there was like a practical reason for that, or, you know, a storytelling reason. What exactly was the logic behind it? I think it works pretty well, and it just helps to really give it a 90s vibe. So more vertical panels on this page, like I said, you know, definitely creates a visual rhythm and consistency all the way throughout. That really just gives it a super 90s vibe, which I like. Here they describe this as Phaedra's, what was a distorted citadel, which was once Phaedra's palace. Love the design of this. You know, not exactly quite sure what it is, almost abstract, but just looks really cool. Wrathchild seems to be disintegrating all the way throughout the issue, right? He's lost part of his mask. He's got herpes all over his head and some bubbling herpes on his chest here, gaping hole. Just very kind of gory and gruesome, which is fun. And then these characters come into play, right, to confront the X-Men. Is that, I mean, this almost looks like Atuma, right? The character from Marvel Comics from back in the early 60s, a Fantastic Four villain at first, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not sure if there's some inspiration being taken from that, or if that's just a coincidence. But yeah, really similar to Atuma's design. And again, like just the rhythm, the 90s feel on this book is just intense. And it's, again, one of the reasons I've been having a lot of fun going through the Death's Head 2 series. It just kind of is a reminder of everything 90s from Image and from Marvel around that time. Just the insane level of hatching here, you know, and just this little detail of Wrathchild's, you know, his actual teeth, you know, penetrating and piercing his own tongue. You know, just a visual choice. I don't think there's anything in the story that really explains why that's going on, but visually just really gruesome and fun. You can tell Liam Sharp's really enjoying this and going just nuts with the hatching. As I mentioned earlier, Wrathchild definitely has that typical 90s villain design. All the villains in Image, you know, in Stormwatch, Hellspawn and Wildcats, Darkthorn and Youngblood, etc., all kind of had a similar design. I feel that came from prior designs that were starting to go in that direction, right? Like in the late 80s, you know, things like you got characters like Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse, and that. It just seems like a more extreme extrapolation of those kind of characters. And you know, Wrathchild, you know, not necessarily being specifically very original as opposed to those other designs, but just something fun about him kind of discombobulating and starting to rot from the inside here. That, you know, we got the original kind of design of the character early on in past issues, and now we're getting him just kind of falling apart throughout. It's pretty cool and interesting. This double page splash, really killer. Phaedra finally, you know, finding the power and the confidence to, you know, attack Wrathchild head on. And here's a page where I feel like we're getting a mix of, you know, that 90s vibe, but also Liam Sharp's kind of roots in more fantasy Conan-based stuff. I've talked about before how now he's, you know, he's recently put out an issue of Conan. I think it's Savage Sword of Conan that he's really proud of. He's talked a lot about on Facebook and social media. Good for him. The stuff I've seen from that issue looks great. And next time I get to a comic shop, I really need to get a copy of that, and I would love to review it. And I know that pretty soon he's going to be putting out an issue of Medieval Spawn, if I'm not mistaken, so I'll have to be picking those up as well. But I feel like there's a mix of that fantasy art, Conan vibe, heavy metal going on here. The aesthetic itself is still very 90s and X-Men, but the elements in the background and stuff definitely give it kind of a heavy metal vibe that I really like. And that obviously Liam Sharp is really good at, and that's more towards what he's going to be doing later on past this series and in the future and up to now, right? The next series we're going to be reviewing, definitely the art has more of a heavy metal Conan vibe than, you know, X-Men, you know, Rob Liefeld extreme hatching kind of vibe that we get here. But we're starting to see little tinges of, like I said, what Liam Sharp is moving towards. I mean, how thin is this vertical panel here? But, you know, the storytelling really works. And there's, again, that rhythm that he establishes. The fact that he uses them all the way throughout, it really gives this specific issue kind of a specific visual character that I really like and I think really works. And it gives it a certain kind of epic feel for some reason. You know, a lot of times people will think if you want to give an epic feel to something, you'll do lots of kind of wide panels and big splash shots. But there's something about the vertical panel here that really opens things up, haha, pun intended, vertically, that just seems to, you know, enhance the epic vibe that he's going for here with the conflict and the characters. Phaedra, definitely more of a fantasy-based kind of design. And then Wrathchild basically starting out like a 90s villain, but really going into, I think, fantasy territory as he disintegrates and starts to mutate and change, you know, states. I don't know exactly what's going on here. There's a lot of madness going on, but beautiful artwork all the way throughout. There's something about his depiction of Cyclops that I always like. I think he does one of the better Cyclops. He does buff him up quite a bit. Wouldn't call him Slim Summers here, but there's just something about how he does Cyclops I think works really well. That's a fun page when you're an artist, right, to get through. That took about half an hour, maybe, at the most. And then you can move on, and it is a splash page, basically, of Wrathchild exploding or disintegrating. And then, boom, once that happens, you know, the story slows down. The layouts definitely help to do that. He sticks with the vertical panels, but obviously not from top to bottom, just on the top tier of this page here. And the action slows down. And Wrathchild is vanquished. Got some cool shots at Death's Head, and then one parting shot. Last time we're going to see the X-Men in Death's Head 2. And just some very strategically placed rips on the costumes for the ladies, you know, to give us a bit of sex appeal, but not reveal too much. We get a bit of under boob from Psylocke. We get just, you know, enough boobies sticking out here without showing the areola or the nipple. Conveniently, the X logo has stayed around to cover that up there. But at the same time, it's kind of a visual cue that hints at it, which I think is funny. A little bit of TNA never hurt, right? In comics, there's certainly a cheesecake aspect to that, especially when it comes to the X-Men characters and the female X-Men characters. And again, just his depiction of Cyclops I really like. The tattered costume works well. Just a cool parting shot of the X-Men. And again, Phaedra in there with her barely there costume, just hiding the important bits. And that's how Liam Sharp chose to end it on Death's Head, with a nice, again, parting shot of the X-Men. Think he did a really good job on this. And just a fun trip down memory lane, reading some real 90s fueled stuff that I hadn't originally read back in the day. And definitely a huge nostalgic feel going through this one. So I definitely recommend Death's Head 1 to 4 as kind of a storyline. And just an example of how crazy 90s comics could get. At Image, at Marvel, and this is a combination of both of those kind of together in one. This is interesting down here. This almost looks like a John Romita Jr. shot. I couldn't say for sure because it's pretty small, but a lot of it definitely seems to be like his aesthetic here. I don't think they actually say it here. I'd have to look that up. Not sure who the artist here is as well. Maybe the same guy I mentioned in one of the ads in past reviews, but pretty interesting looking artwork here. Another 90s type villain with the cape and the insane shoulder pads and stuff. You know, just another example of what was going around that time, what was popular and what was being copied. Super Soldiers issue 1. I've reviewed that one. You can check it out in the archives. And Wild Thing is another one that's got some kind of, I remember looking through them, there's some crazy artwork there that like it's hit or miss. I like some of it, and some of it seems a little amateurish. Maybe at some point if I find these in $1 brand, I think they're very expensive, I'll review them. I remember, I think issue 2, there's a guest starring Spider-Man, Carnage, and Venom, excuse me. But they're like in a virtual reality program, so it's not the actual characters, but the depictions of those characters by this artist were pretty interesting. So, you know, if I find these issues, I will be reviewing it at some point, because I do think there's some interesting aspects to the art that we can talk about. Forget the artist's name, but Nikki Doyle is the character, not the artist. So once I find copies of those, I'll be reviewing them on the channel here. So there you go, guys. That is my review of Death's Head 2, issue number 4 from Marvel UK. If you are still watching the channel and you are subscribed, thank you so much for your loyalty. I really do appreciate it. Hope you're still enjoying the videos. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. It really helps the channel out, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. Speaking of comic books, my books, Big Baby and STARCRASHER, are available at KINGCOMICS.CA, so check that out. And check out my books, please. It really helps, again, to support the art that I do and support the channel as well. So everyone out there, thank you for watching, and have yourselves an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13. 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.